our ICRIER's engagement with Japan and what plans we have in the coming year or so. But for me, this has been, a very exciting day. I spent the whole day learning a lot, and one knows about the constraints of the Indian economy, one knows about the constraints that we are going through, also of the Japanese economy. That the Japanese economy, as was mentioned during the course of the day, is also showing declining growth rates. It's an aging economy. It's got these kind of three arrows, as they call them. One of the arrows is actually called needles by somebody. There's got this fiscal, monetary and structural transformation that is envisaged in Japan. And so while Japan is a $40,000 per capita economy and India is only a $1,500 per capita income economy, so there's wide differences. Japan has slowed down, is grappling with challenges about growth and consumption tax, as well as aging. And India, on the other hand, is grappling with problems of urbanization, which is a pillar on which we can. And those of you following the international economy, commodity prices fortunately have had a positive impact on India. Not so much for other countries, but for India, commodity price declines have had a positive impact of India. Our physical deficit, our current account deficit, and therefore given us that space to make those bold changes that we need to make. And some of the bold changes that were mentioned during the course of the day to kind of further cement our relationship with the Japanese are, tax reform, financial sector reform, taxation reform. Of course, labor law reform has always been on the top of the mind of Japanese investors. And that's beginning to happen, as Ambassador Yagi said, that's beginning to happen at the level of the states. Rajasthan is showing the way for labor reform. MP is going to follow suit. So there will be labor law reform, and the central government is committed to reduce all those laws, exceeding 100 laws down to 5, so that they become simple, they become transparent, and also become easy to implement. So all of these were discussed during the course of the day, and this is something, as I said, and I look to the future of India with a lot of hope, in the sense that because there is devolution, because there's an external environment which is benign. Yes, world trade growth has slowed down, but there is a benign external environment. We have got a large domestic market. There is fiscal space for reform. And given that we can solve some of our other kind of political issues within India, so the government will have to expend a little bit of political capital getting everybody on the same board, on the same page. But I think GST, as we have addressed during the course of the day, GST, we need to convert India into a single market. GST, just like connectivity, infrastructure with Japanese technology, with Japanese finances, and with Japanese managerial skills, as Mr. Bhargava pointed out so eloquently during the course of the day. GST reform and connectivity can be game changers for us in India, and that will serve as markets to Japanese investment, as the minister also said, because they'll have all these externality effects. So railways is providing is one of the beacons that can provide an avenue for Japanese investment, and all those spillover effects. We know the Maruti experience, although it took a long time for them to turn around. We know the Maruti experience, we discussed that today. These can all have positive externality impacts for the Indian economy and for the Japanese economy. One of the things that has plagued the Indian economy, and what we discussed today, is the fact that we've had these islands of excellence. We've exported the best to the world. We've had islands of excellence, but we haven't been able to make it more pervasive in the Indian economy. We haven't been able to scale up. We have the ability to do that, but it requires plodding, it requires hard work, and it requires, as the Japanese say, a process of continuous improvement, as Mr. Bhargava says, Kaizen. So there are many things to learn from the Japanese. I learned a lot today, but there are many things that we can learn from the Japanese. But as the conference has shown us, that there are complementarities, despite the fact that TPP is going to happen and has happened, and there will be impacts on countries like India. There is RCEP. We can deepen that relationship with the Japanese through the Japanese help in RCEP and try and offset some of the adverse impacts that will happen as a result of the TPP in RCEP, and the Japanese are willing to help us in that. We heard that in one of the sessions. So, but we have to be willing to be able to take advantages of the situation that is arising between us. What was striking for me, and here is, I will just mention a couple of research ideas that I got during the course of the day. What struck me, and I didn't know this before, and Yoshino-san, of course, has spent a long time working on SMEs, and he has spoken earlier in ICRIER and in India on SMEs. And SME, I don't have to belabor the point that big companies, of course, have their place, but SMEs are critical for, you look at the history of industries across the world, and you'll know the criticality of SMEs. And I was quite surprised to see that the presence of Japanese SMEs in India is so small. And we need to, I think if we have to kind of cement this relationship and take it forward, we need to find ways to encourage, in fact, get more Japanese SMEs in, and of course encourage Indian SMEs, but encourage more Japanese SMEs to come into India. I think that is critical, because SMEs are the light, and they can provide a lot of good impacts on the Indian economy, positive impacts, including employment and innovation, and SMEs are known for that. Google was not Google when it started, Amazon was not Amazon, and so on and so forth. These were small companies, had an idea, innovated, and then became big. And we need those small companies, SMEs, maybe even MSMEs, to be able to, the Japanese SMEs, to come into India and provide all those externalities. So that's, I think, why is the engagement of SMEs so low, and what can we do to improve that? The second research question that comes to mind also during the course of the day was the fact that Japan is not using India as a destination for exporting. And that is something that commentators today have said that will change in the future, and we have to do a host of things to improve our business environment. We know that, and though everybody spent time talking about that: infrastructure, connectivity, customs reform, trade facilitation, taxation, labor laws. I mean, the whole host of things that we need to do to improve our doing business indicators. But again, the external environment is such that India can become a destination for exports. And how do we make it a destination for exports for Japanese investment? They've used Thailand, Japanese have used China, they've used Thailand, they've used Southeast Asia. Now, again, the stars are aligned in our favor. A lot of investment will be coming out of China, that space will be created, and we need to leverage that space. And therefore, and sometimes, surprising, striking data, 0.2% is the profit margin. Of course, one needs to deconstruct that now, and so it becomes clear why they are not using it, because it's difficult. So our labor cost advantage gets offset by the other costs of doing business in India, and we need to somehow try and address that. So I think the second question that comes to mind is, what would it take for us to enable Japanese to use the Indian market for exports? 12% is the number that I think was shown by it, and Thailand is 40, 45, 50%. So we can actually, if not reach that, at least get to half of that, and that will have wonderful kind of spillover impacts in the Indian economy. And the reason being that if you are competitive, if you can be used as a competitive destination for exports, then it has feedback effects into the local economy, and we'll have local impacts on the local manufacturing, just like import competition does to your local industry. So I think the two research questions that have come to my mind, as I said, is that SME participation and how India can be as a destination. And even the Prime Minister did talk about this recently, how that India can be used as a destination for increasing FDI exports. Remember, China's entire model of growth was driven by FDI kind of motivated exports, and India hasn't been able to leverage that strength that the domestic market offers, and to make inroads into foreign markets. So I think that's the other research question that comes to mind. Of course, IT, a lot of work has already been done, and I think will continue to be done. We have synergies in IT and hardware and software, the two obvious, but I think as the speaker suggested, we have to now begin to move up the value chain, and we are beginning to do that. So IT will, I think, happen on its own given India's strength and momentum. I think we can play a facilitation role in trying to highlight what needs to be done. And of course, financing. There's a lot of reform that is planned. The financial sector, Professor Bhagwati, who's an expert on this, and touched upon it. We're doing a lot of reform in the financial sector. It's slow. There are big reform that is planned on the financial sector. The rupee bond market is an example, but we also need to fortify our public sector banks, open up the banking space to private sector, which you'd be happy to know that new bank licenses have been given. There is no new private investment that is going to come in, and the Basel III norms are difficult, but especially for public sector banks, given the NPA. So we need fresh capital, we need fresh investment in our bank, and the government is thinking about that. So a strong financial sector, growth of the rupee bond market, and easing of some of the requirements, like we mentioned the PSL requirements, all those are planned on the cards, and I think the financial sector will then of course lubricate the wheels of the manufacturing sectors as well. So I think at the end of the day, these were some of the kind of ideas that came to my mind, especially as a research institution, and we could perhaps follow them up. But it's been a wonderful day, and I profusely thank the Embassy of Japan, Ambassador Yagi, and of course Ambassador Singh, who's been, and his team, who've been the architect of this conference. It's been a wonderful conference, and thank you all for your participation as well, and for coming from far distances to participate. Yoshini-san, thank you so much for not sleeping and coming here and making your presentation, and benefiting us with all the wisdom that you bring along with your presentation. So thank you all very, very much.
I will be very brief, because I do know that Ambassador Yagi has to go back to host an official dinner at his residence. Let me start by saying that I think we've spent a useful day, because we are pretty much now up to speed on the state of play as far as the bilateral economic relationship is concerned. We have been able to see that there are gaps. There are gaps of culture and language. There are gaps in ethos and work culture. I think borrowing good examples from Japan, like Kaizen, is something which is already being done in India, and it's already been propagated very systematically in many companies which have a partnership with Japan, and in companies outside that arena as well. So let's hope that will continue, especially I think for ITES sector advancement of opportunities. Issues of culture and language need to be bridged rather rapidly through meaningful knowledge partnerships. And I have mentioned to the ambassador earlier, but again we spoke a little bit about the knowledge partnerships which emanate from institutions like IIT Hyderabad, which is substantially supported by Japan, and has elements of Japanese curriculum, as well as infrastructure support from JICA, which goes along with it. Now that said, we can look forward to this summit in 3 weeks time, with some very meaningful outcomes. I don't want to list all of them. I just want to be general, so that I'm not shooting the gun. We can hope for progress on technology, on defense and security, on financing for infrastructure, and of course hopefully on the railway, high-speed rail element as well. I think that's the key kernel or the core of the expected outcomes from the visit. So let's hold our horses just for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks more, and then we'll know what comes out of this. I'd like to thank the ambassador for his constant support for this conference and this idea of moving the relationship forward. We know that Ambassador Yagi has had an outstanding innings of 3 years in India, and he'll be leaving very, very shortly. Very shortly means less than a week. So we wish him Godspeed and all success in his next assignment. And we will miss him, and he will be more than welcome to come back and join us. And I've suggested to him to keep in mind our next conference, and hopefully we'll see him again back in Delhi. I add to the words of Rajat in thanking the speakers and panelists. The two speakers who came all the way from Japan for a short time and spent and gave us very valuable advice. Dean Yoshino Sensei and Matsumoto-san from JICA. I think we benefited greatly from Delhi and